Alafia, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and director of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. I'm here in the studio with a show that I'm calling The Art of Spiritual Practice because I think there is no one who knows more about the art of life, which is a subtitle of our show, than my guest. My guest is Dr. Leonard Ingram, who is, of course, always known for his expertise in anger management, but today I'm asking him to be Bhagwan Ra AfriKa as well, from the House of Rah. And I want to greet you, Rashekum.
Rashekum.
I want to, first of all, ask you how it is that you came to found the House of Rah.
Well, I don't know if we have enough time to say it all. I'll try to summarize it a bit. But of course, in my youth, I had the great good fortune of coming in contact with the spiritual path. The spiritual path that came to be known as Sant Mat. Sant Mat means the path of the masters. The path of the master is a kind of collection of all of the teachings of all the various saints and sages across all of the great traditions. Sant Mat is a kind of repository that holds our entire spiritual heritage that has been bequeathed to us by all these great mystics from Africa, India, from every culture. So Sant Mat was something that I encountered by grace and good fortune in my youth. And so naturally, I wanted to share that good fortune. And so many, many years later, I had an opportunity to do that. And I thought that by creating the House of Rah is basically an attempt to resurrect the concept that existed in ancient Africa, the Per-Ankh, as it were called in those ancient times, the house of life, the house of knowledge, the House of Rah, so that other people in my community will have an opportunity to access that quality of spirituality. Growing up, I found that many of us were limited to a kind of spirituality that was being dispensed through a lot of storefront churches and so forth and so on. Not a particularly high quality of spirituality was available in our community, you see. And so I wanted to create some kind of a situation where those in our community could come in contact with this Dhamma, with these profound teachings. During the 70s, if you recall, many spiritual teachers from India began to come to America and so forth. We saw the arrival of Buddhism and a lot of the Hindu swamis and so forth. But the interesting thing is none of them came to our hood. None of them brought those beautiful teachings of the Buddha or Mahavira or Kabir or the Upanishads and so forth. Well, they didn't come to Lundale, they didn't come to Inglewood, you see, as if there was no genuine spiritual seekers in our community. So whatever their reason for not bringing the Dhamma to our community, I thought that, well, this is some work that needs to get done, and I didn't see anybody else doing it, so I decided to create the House of Rah to serve as a place where people could come and really access an entirely different species of spirituality that is something altogether different from storefront religion, which has been the source of much spiritual retardation in our communities. So that's the quick story.
Well, thank you for the quick story. You know, the House of Rah, in many ways, is more than a place, because the House of Rah will meet wherever you determine that we should come together. And right now, we meet quite often, in addition to the south side of Chicago in the West Chesterfield community, also at Cedar Park Cemetery.
Yeah.
Which many people find a little bit unique. How is it that you choose the places that you choose for the assembling?
Well, of course, I do take into consideration that I want to make the meeting place as convenient as possible. So hence I have moved it from place to place over the years, but I have particularly always kept some activity in the cemetery or funeral home. We used to meet at the Rayner's Funeral Home and so forth and so on. And the reason for that is really quite ancient. In our culture, there's a complete denial about the reality of death. And as a result of this denial about the reality of death, most people do not make any preparation for the one thing they can count on that will happen in their life, which is that they will die, you see. And I wanted an environment that created a kind of seriousness, because spirituality is serious business, because it's a matter of life and death. So I chose to meet in the cemetery so that people will not forget the fact that they will die. And this is the first lesson. It's very interesting that in ancient Africa, in ancient Egyptian Africa, Nubian Africa, so forth and so on, that was the first spiritual lesson. The foundation of spiritual development begins with our dealing with the reality of our own mortality. That's why you'll find, for instance, in ancient Egypt, there was a lot of emphasis on death and dying, and it looks morbid to the uninformed onlooker. Are you following me? But the reality was that these ancient African and Kemetic sages understood that in order for a person to really make any kind of genuine spiritual progress, they have to be aware of their death. Otherwise, they will be superficial in their approach. Are you with me? So you have to keep that in mind. And so, like my ancestors who created all these necropolis and so forth and on, and that's where they gave Dharma. That's where they gave the teachings, you see? With the understanding that when you come in here, be aware that you will die. If you're not aware that you are going to die, you will not be a serious person. You cannot, by definition, be a serious person, you see. You're deluded. And spirituality is about the search for truth. So how can you search for truth and avoid the most obvious truth of all, that you're going to die? Another reason that I hold it in these cemeteries to ward off the superficial. You see, if a person is afraid of death, then they are not going to really have the kind of psychological resiliency to deal with the ordeal of spiritual development, you see. So it wards off the superficial. In ancient India, for instance, beloved, they will build their centers where they will give the spiritual teaching. They will build them deep in the forest or deep in the jungle, because they knew that people who were too full of fear would never come. And only the serious seeker will show up, you see? So it acts as a barrier, a buffer to keep away the superficial people as well.
So you're not interested in the multitudes?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Well, I can tell you this, that when we are saying cemetery, we're not talking about out on the grounds.
No.
We're talking about the Cedar Park is actually a very beautiful building.
Yes.
And so are the spaces in Rayner that are used for places like, for events like repasts and so forth and so on. We're not talking about the morgue.
No, not at all.
but the practices are not confined to 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. So how have you chosen the times of meetings?
Again, I try to always accommodate the Sangha, the community of individuals who have sprang up around this whole effort that motivated my establishing the House of Rah in the first place. And so I try to set times that is convenient for the majority of the Sangat. But you see, what we do at the House of Rah really cannot be constricted by time. It's always time for what we do. So any time is a good time.
So not 11 o'clock every Sunday morning, but, and not every Sunday.
And not even every Sunday.
And why is that?
Well, it's not church.
Okay.
You know. And so we don't really have that kind of a schedule that the typical church will have, where you have Sunday services, Sunday school, and so forth and so on. We come together as a community with a very different agenda. And the other thing you have to remember is that members of the Sangha, members of the house, are practicing their spiritual disciplines on a daily basis. So it is something that is going on every day. So we don't have a kind of a single day set aside. Every day is a day for worship.
That you come and be spiritual, and then you go on about your affairs and be unspiritual or aspiritual.
Right. No, it's not like that. You know, spiritual life is just that. It's a way of life. It is something to be done on a daily basis. So once a month, usually I'll come. In the past, we used to meet more frequently. In the past, we did meet sometime every Sunday, every other Sunday, and so forth and so on. But I'm getting old now.
Okay.
Body getting tired.
Okay.
And plus, the Sangha has grown so much and matured so much that there's many people there who's quite capable of communicating the essential teachings and so forth. And so there's other meetings during the month that is not held at Cedar Park, the Westchester area, and so forth and so on. People get together on their own and come together and have meetings and so forth and so on. It's a way of life, you see. That is what distinguishes spirituality from religion, you see. That's what distinguishes Santmat, the teachings of the saints, from dogma and doctrine. It's actually a way of life and living. You have to live this Dhamma. Our ancestor put it very succinct. They say that you must not only speak Ma'at, not just talk, spiritual talk. A lot of people have confused spirituality with the ability to talk about spirituality. Well, that's not spirituality in its most fundamental sense. So our ancestors said that you must not only speak Ma'at, right? You must do Ma'at, right? You must live Ma'at. And so this is what spirituality is all about. The kind of spirituality that I advocate at the House of Rah is about a way of life. It's not religion.
The pillars, ahimsa, talk about ahimsa, the necessity.
Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word, and it really translates more like the word harmlessness. Because one of the goals of spiritual development is to enable us to reach that level of our humanity where we do not hurt one another. Jesus says somewhere that we should love ye one another. Well, obviously that's a call for the practice of ahimsa, this kind of loving kindness that we should interact with one another. Ahimsa is the conscious and deliberate cultivation and the development of that ability to be harmless, to not hurt other human beings' feelings intentionally. Now, of course, sometimes, invariably, we're going to, just out of sheer randomness, perhaps hurt somebody's feeling. But ahimsa is meaning that it shouldn't be done intentionally. Not only other human beings, but all sentient beings. So ahimsa very often is reflected at the level even of our dietary practices. Vegetarianism, for instance, that most people are familiar with. Well, vegetarianism has this origin rooted in this whole concept of cultivating that state of mind and consciousness that is ahimsa. Vegetarianism, of course, is the practice of not eating animals and or flesh and things of that nature. There's different levels of vegetarianism. But vegetarianism was a part of a spiritual practice related to the cultivation of this ahimsa, this harmlessness. The nutritional benefits that came from being a vegetarian was a byproduct. That was not the motive. Of course, today people are practicing vegetarianism, but their whole motive is fundamentally to get better health, and nothing's wrong with that. But if they are able to derive some of the health benefits from their vegetarianism, but they're hurting other human beings, then it's a contradiction, you see. Ahimsa is about the practice of loving kindness for all sentient beings. So that's one of the pillars. You can't very well be a spiritual person, or let me put it this way, you are a spiritual person to the degree that you're able to actually practice and demonstrate love toward others. It's not. It can never be just rhetorical. And by others, it means all others. Now, if you're a Christian and you're a real Christian, then you will love a Muslim. You will love a Hindu. You will love the Buddhist. You follow me? You will not be this narrow-minded fundamentalist, so forth and so on. You see, if you're a real Muslim, you will love Christians. You will love Jews. You follow me? Wherever there's any genuine, authentic spirituality in a person, you will always find ahimsa. Please make a note. There are concomitant phenomena. Where there's genuine spirituality, there will always be ahimsa. Great compassion, great loving kindness, beyond the limitations of rhetoric. So ahimsa is one of the pillars of spiritual practice.
And abstention. Abstention from abstaining
from drugs, alcohol, any mind-altering substance, because the ideal in spirituality is to reach higher and clearer states of mind and awareness. Well, drugs, alcohol, and those things clouds the mind. And with a clouded mind, a mind that is all drunken, then how could you live a life with such precision? You see, your judgment is clouded. So all of these kinds of things, drugs, alcohol, so forth and so on, that clouds the mind's ability to make good judgment, sound judgment, are to be avoided. We're trying to heal our minds. The use of drugs obviously undermine that whole effort, doesn't it? You see.
What, do you put tobacco in that same category?
Some traditions do hold tobacco in that same category. Some do not. It varies because the Sant Mat is made up of the teachings coming from many different paths. So in the majority of the path, they will include anything that will seriously threaten your health. Now, not only tobacco, but you could take something like vegetarian foods even, but if they're taken in too great a quantity, then it will damage. But yes, sometimes in many traditions, tobacco is also included. Not in all, but in some, but in a lot of them.
Morality.
Definitely.
A moral life. Standards for that.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, basically, it's this, is that you should really not hurt the feelings of other people. This includes all moral standards.
Okay.
You see, ethical standards. You shouldn't harm anybody with your body, speech, or thoughts. You should not steal, obviously, because that will hurt somebody. You see, so that one injunctive encumbers everything. Thou should not murder nobody. Clearly, murder is going to hurt the victim as well as the victim's family. All of those are derivatives of this one principle of ahimsa. Ahimsa is a kind of umbrella that includes all morality, all ethics come under that one general category. But yes, a moral life is definitely required, you see. Fidelity. And
Fidelity, faithfulness.
Faithfulness, fidelity.
In your
relationship, intimate personal relationship, husband, wife, so forth and so on. There must be fidelity, you see. You should not be promiscuous. You see, you should not
one
be
wife,
one wife,
one husband,
you see. The ideal is that you should not reduce another person to just a object of sexual gratification. It is insulting. And it is disrespectful, and it hurts the other person, you see, to be used as such. So promiscuousness is not a part of the spiritual process. It must
polygamy
be
is not a part of a moral life.
Well, there's obviously, for instance, in different cultures, you have to remember in different cultures at different times, there were different standards, different definitions. For instance, if you look at some of the old ancient prophets and so forth, well, many of them were polygamous, to be quite frank. I mean, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had many wives and so forth. But it wasn't a kind of polygamy that we understand today. It was a different kind of polygamy that informed these ancient times. It was a kind of polygamy where you were actually practicing ahimsa. Now, this may strike you as being odd, but you can imagine that to take the wives of your brothers or your friends into your home upon the untimely death of your friend or your brother, and to do for them what a husband would do. You follow me? It's coming from a different place. Those ancient practitioners of polygamy were not doing what Don Juan is doing. You follow me? They were not pimping. You follow me? They were taking care of these women financially, taking care of their children. It was an act of compassion, was not sexually motivated. Are you with me? That's a different kind of polygamy, a polygamy that is not based on a man's ambition to have multiple mates for the sheer sake of sexual gratification. It was being responsible for the welfare and the well-being of your brother's or your friend's family, and you would assume that. You see, very different. A lot more can be said about it. Ultimately, you see, spirituality is something that is intrinsic. You know, you can't always distinguish it from the outside. Now, there's been a lot of very spiritual people that have been mistook to be anti-spiritual. Jesus, for instance, not following the rules of the Sabbath, associating with whores and harlots and criminals. Well, naturally, to the religious community, he was in violation of everything that it meant by being religious and spiritual. But I'd say unto you that Jesus was more spiritual than the Pharisees and all of those other rabbis, wasn't he? So it's about where your heart is at. Spirituality is a matter of the heart.
Meditation.
Oh, that's the cornerstone of it all, isn't it? You see, meditation. In fact, all these other practices of vegetarianism and ahimsa and the avoidance of drugs, alcohol, and so forth and so on. All of those are purposed to give you an opportunity to get the maximum benefit from your meditation. Meditation is a process of training the mind. Meditation is the means by which we are able to transcend the ego. You have to understand that spirituality has as its aim the means and giving us the means and the technology by which we may transcend our egos. Ego is the source of all of the horror that goes on in this world. It has always been the source of it. Hence, all genuine spiritual traditions focus on helping its adherents transcend their egos. Meditation is the means by which one most radically transcends ego. Hence, in the traditions, all that emphasis is placed on meditation, transcending of the ego, which is the source of all of the kinds of sin and horror that we see on television and read about in our newspaper and see in our communities and so forth.
And you have more than one time talked about meditation as a process rather than as a single act,
Right.
as a state
Right.
to abide in.
Right, right. You see, with the advent of some of the swamis coming out of India to America, the whole concept of meditation got westernized. We began to associate meditation with some kind of relaxation technique, although it will relax you, but that's not the purpose or goal of meditation. Meditation is something being recreational, something that you do for 15 or 20 minutes a day, and then you go about your business the rest of the day. Well, that's not meditation in the spiritual sense. Meditation is a means by which you are able to reach a certain state of consciousness. It would be more appropriate to call it a meditative state of consciousness. And this meditative state of consciousness is characterized by the fact that the ego, you see, is no longer the basis of your behavior. By ego, I mean this kind of pathological preoccupation with yourself. Just me, 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 me. When you are self-possessed like that, when you are discontracted, by definition, you can't be loving because you can't even go beyond the limitation of your own self-preoccupation. Are you with me? You have no empathy. You can't step outside yourself. The meditative state of consciousness, then, is that state of consciousness by abiding in, you are no longer limited to your ego. You can act in the behalf of others for the first time because you're not encumbered by your own selfishness, you see. And so the purpose of sitting meditation, for instance, and that's what you probably are luring to, where in most traditions they're going to tell you to sit for X amount of time. For instance, in our tradition, we say you should start your day off with a period of practice. Like people get up and pray, it's to start your day, to set the tone, a minimum of 2.5 hours. That's very different from recreational meditation to begin with, right? So you can see how a non-serious person is not really going to be interested in this kind of meditation because that's quite a sacrifice, isn't it? So you start off by sitting, and that is to help prepare yourself for the rest of the day. So when you finish your sitting meditation, you hopefully have brought yourself into that meditative state of consciousness. Now you operate out of that the whole day. You're always in that meditative state of consciousness, you see. It is not that you simply sit for a couple of hours and then you just let your mind become again egoic and then run out and wreak havoc everywhere you go, you see. It's being in control of all of that. Meditative techniques and technology is about learning how to stay in control of your mind, stay in control of your emotion. If you are able to do that, you can stay in control of your speech, of your behavior, of your actions, and thus your impact on others, you see. But a person that can't control their mind, can't control their emotions, how will they control their behavior? That's not going to happen, is it? No, you see. They cannot live deliberately. Their lives are just helter-skelter. They cannot practice. They don't have the discipline. So meditation is about learning how to discipline your mind, discipline your emotions, so that they serve as your tools rather than your master. Most people senses, emotions, and their thoughts are their master. And they simply have no pre-force but to obey whatever impulse arises in them. Now, someone says something to you, do something to you, you see, and the ego is there, it's insulted. And immediately you want to have revenge. That's what anger is all about, isn't it? Well, as long as you are unable to control that impulsivity, right, you will respond. Meditation is about giving you the ability to transcend that impulse in that given moment. It's about learning really, beloved, how to rise to a level of consciousness whereby you are able to resist and transcend the impulses of anger, lust, greed, attachment, and vanity. Because these 5 states of mind, these 5 negative states of mind, are those states of mind that produces everything that is horrible about human interaction with other human beings.
Those are the deadly sins.
Those are the deadly sins. Yeah. The 7 deadly sins are derived out of that constellation, right? Because people say that all the time, you should not sin. Okay, great. Now, how do you do that? If your state of consciousness has not reached a certain level, how would you avoid that? You will have no option but to sin, because you have no control. Sin meaning, of course, what it meant originally, to miss the mark. To miss the mark. It means that your life and your living will lack accuracy and precision. Lacking accuracy and precision, it will lack meaning. And isn't that what we see? People are just living fundamentally meaningless lives without purpose, just all over the place. Sinful, off the mark, never hitting it on the mark, you see. Trying to be happy, but never able to pull it off. They keep missing it. Now you marry some man, you marry some woman, and you are trying in that effort to make yourself happy, but you, wrong man, wrong woman. You just keep missing. That's sin. Missing the mark. Missing happiness.
So you do it again.
And you do it again and you do it again, you see? And you're always missing because you are not operating out of that kind of level of consciousness that gives you the ability to have some accuracy in the first place.
How interesting it is to contemplate all of the changes that we make in order to avoid pain and to be happy. You know, change jobs, change locations, change mates, change
everything,
change styles. You know, just a constant search for the thing that will finally let you have peace or be at ease.
Absolutely. And that's the whole purpose of spirituality, is to give you that clarity of mind and consciousness whereby you can have happiness and have it more abundantly, as Jesus says. You see, ultimate, supreme peace. But that requires a whole different level of consciousness that is not bogged down, not obscured by these negative passions and perversions, anger, lust, greed, attachment, and vanity, you see. And meditation is the only way by which you will be able to transcend all of that, you see. So meditation and spirituality are linked. You can't have one without the other, you see. That's what makes it different from religion, you see. And most people confuse the two, you see. Religion is simply about subscribing to a set of doctrines and dogma, rituals, ceremonies, you see. Religion is about believing. Spirituality is about experiencing, you see. Vastly different things. Experiencing real happiness. No fooling, no kidding. Because that's what everybody's up to. Is that about right? Just trying to be happy, but they're amateurs at it, you see.
What about suffering in this scenario? The inevitable suffering.
Here's an interesting thing. when you are able to reach a certain level of consciousness, what you discover is the nature of reality. This is interesting. And when you discover the nature of reality, what you discover is that that this reality is made up of what we call polarities, opposites, duality. And life and all of its events is just this pendulation, this movement between day and night. You see? Pain and pleasure. You see? These are just pairs of opposites. This is how reality is. And once you accept things, there is no suffering. This is interesting. Suffering fundamentally is a refusal to accept some aspect of reality. Suffering is not pain. Pain is sensual based. I pinch you, you feel pain. That's not suffering, that's pain. Suffering is your response to that. It's mental, purely subjective. And it is that kind of reaction where you refuse to accept some aspect of this pendulation, this duality. You see? Spirituality is about accepting things the way things really are based on a profound understanding, a radical understanding of the way things really are. Now, there will be vicissitudes in life. Accept that, then it's not a problem. Are you following me? It only becomes problematic and becomes a source of suffering when we don't want to accept it. It's almost like not wanting to accept night. Now you make nighttime into a problem. Now you suffer at night because you don't want to accept the fact that there will be darkness. If there's going to be light, there's going to be darkness. That's Damo San and Tano. That's how this thing is made. In fact, you can't even have any kind of experience without duality. You won't know what it feels like to not have a toothache until you have a toothache. You can't appreciate toothache-lessness. Are you with me? It's like that. So suffering is there only because of our ignorance. Is what I'm saying. Yes, there is suffering, but there is suffering because there is ignorance. Remove the ignorance and there's no suffering. There's pain, yes. Pain cannot be avoided in life. If there was no pain, there would be no pleasure. This is the pendulation. This is necessary. If you never got tired, you cannot appreciate the joy of resting. It just will not happen. Are you with me? So that must be like that. So pain will be there, but suffering is optional. Or should be optional. Unfortunately, if you have not been able to see things the way things really are, then your suffering is inevitable. What the Buddha called dukkha, suffering, sorrow, disappointment, profound dissatisfaction, because you want dogs to stop barking, and you never want the night to come, and you don't want season to change. You don't want to lose anything in life. But life is made up of losses.
We don't want to grow old. Hence
you don't want to grow
Botox.
old. That's right. You don't want to get sick. But all of this is a part of the way things really are. The key thing for dealing with suffering is to accept reality. And then respond appropriately. Are you with me? And respond appropriately. Get in line, bow down, submit, surrender. That is one of the most beautiful things about Islam, you see, is that the notion of surrendering. Surrendering to what? To reality. Accept, you see. And then respond appropriately.
Which does not mean doing nothing.
No.
Does not mean with a diagnosis that you are to take no medicine, see no doctors.
Not at all. No. In fact, that's the only time you will take it. It's almost like if I get sick and I don't accept that I'm sick, I won't even go to the doctor in the first place. 'Cause I will not accept that I'm sick. Therefore, I will not respond appropriately, which is to go to the doctor. So even to seek medical help means that you must first accept the fact that you're sick. Is that right? You must accept reality, the way reality is. Not the way you want it to be, but the way it actually are. But you can't even do that unless you can see it. And you won't be able to see it unless you're able to free your consciousness from the limitations imposed upon it by these 5 negative states that we talked about: anger, lust, greed, attachment, vanity. These things obscure, they weigh down, they contract, they cover up your ability to see things. You know, they cloud your vision, and you can't see things. When you're angry, you can't see things clearly. When you're under the throes of lust, you can't see things clearly. You see, so forth and so on. So, but yes, there is suffering only to the degree that one remains ignorant.
You know, so many people are writing books and talking about concepts that come out of Eastern wisdom and teachings. After it appears just a superficial investigation, almost an eavesdropping on a culture and hearing a few buzzwords and then coming up with a book with an attempt to explain certain of those concepts. And I'm always clear that you can't lift a concept out of a culture unless you're going to lift the family that goes with it. Obviously, because it requires that to understand. And there's a lot of literature on karma. And a lot of people parade up and down stages on television, you know, trying to tell people about what that is. I know it's a huge thing.
Very huge.
Can you speak a little?
Just a little bit.
All right.
Karma, most fundamentally, now I'm going to reduce this to its very core, cut through all of the other metaphysical BS. Karma is fundamentally the realization that you're not the doer of anything. That events, circumstances, and situations that is coming into your life, these are happenings. These are happenings based on prior actions that you've taken. The concept of predetermination.
Predestination.
Predestination, because you were born with a destiny. That destiny is what is your karma. That destiny will require that you will get sick at a certain time, you will break your leg at a certain time. All of that is predetermined, already set in motion. You're not doing any of it. Karma is to realize this. Karma means to therefore accept full responsibility for the circumstances and situation that you find yourself in life, because those circumstances and situations are the outcome of your own prior actions.
So at some point you were the doer.
Yes, at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
At some point.
Now you are the receiver.
Now you're the receiver.
Of prior doing.
Of the prior doing. Now, even that is a half-truth, because when we start getting into the heart of mysticism, language begins to fail us more and more and more and more. You know, I will have to start reciting poetry here to go deeper. And then to go even deeper than that, I would have to get up and start dancing here. And to go deeper still, then I would have to just fall absolutely silent. You see. At the level of language, everything that I say about it will only be a half-truth, because that's the limitation of language. But to condense it, the argument, karma fundamentally means that for every action, there is a consequence. And that everything that has happened to you and will happen to you, your destiny is the outcome of a prior action. And you have to go through those consequences.
So there is no injustice.
None. This is what the African ancestors really truly understood. That's why in ancient African spiritual tradition, the concept of ma'at was that you don't seek revenge. The universe will handle that business. You see? So when you practice ma'at, in African spirituality, which perhaps was the first form of spirituality on the planet, introduced this concept of karma, so that you would understand you're not a victim here. You see, this whole notion about being a victim is unenlightened. And you will not now react in such a way that you create more karma. The theory of karma tells us, therefore, don't react and create more karma on top of the karma you're already experiencing. Now, that's not even a good answer. I'm not even satisfied with it, because the question that you asked about karma is a profound question. It's corner teaching. Jesus puts it very simply. He says, you shall reap what you sow. And that is true. Karma is this, what you're reaping based on what you have sown.
And yet we are continuing to sow.
When you react, you see? When you react. That's what Jesus meant when he says, if someone slaps you, give them the other, and he's saying break the karma, break the chain. Don't react. Don't hit back. And that's a hard thing to live, isn't it?
Yes, you know, it's just certainly not a coincidence that your expertise is in anger management, because I was talking to someone who has an issue with her mother, and the conflict was so strong that neither one of them was willing to forgive, and so they were just estranged from each other, and both of them professed to be Christians. Which is, you know, said, well, you know, look at your own teachings. How often must I forgive my brother? 70 times 7. Have you done that yet? Now, did you get that part right? But each one of them feels offended by the other, and that each one feels that she is right, you know, and the other is wrong, and an apology is due on both sides. Well, it's a stalemate. You can't ever resolve that. So someone has to do that, has to turn the other cheek and turn it again, you know, and not feel as though someone has been allowed to get away with something. Because the growth takes place in the person who is able to transcend the anger.
You see. And that's the that's what is so profound about that teaching. And it doesn't surprise me that the mother and daughter both profess to be Christians, you see, not realizing what it really means to be a Christian. No doubt victims of storefront religion, you see. Never really encountered the profound teachings of the great master, you see. Never heard Jesus clearly. It was never explained to them clearly. Are you with me?
It's hard to be a Christian if you don't understand.
It's impossible.
What the teachings, the import of the teachings.
It's impossible. And you will never understand it at the storefront level of religion, because Reverend C.T. Chicken Wing doesn't possess that knowledge. You with me? And that's the tragedy. Lifelong members of a church, no ability to love one another, mother and daughter. That's the story of the world, isn't it?
It's really sad.
Yeah.
And I'm remembering that you are, by the time this airs, it will have happened, that you're going to be doing a workshop on the egoic basis of conflict and relationships. And I invited one of these people to come to that, and that person can't come because she is committed to working in her church. But it's just, that's so ironic, because she would be more competent in working in her church if she could have a better understanding of herself and her behavior toward others. But I think that even though churches have Sunday schools, the Sunday schools do not appear to be designed to teach people how to be that which they profess to practice. You know, you come and you learn some more script, you learn some more interpretations of scripture, but you don't aside from the 10 Commandments, which are freely violated, you know, no one is talking about what that actually looks like in your daily life. What does it look like to really practice thou shalt not kill, aside from, you know, using a weapon to end someone's life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is because, you see, there's no spiritual person in that community to make such demands. And that's the distinction. When the mystic, when the sage, when the guru is no longer present, you see, then it always just becomes ritual, ceremony, at the level of rhetoric. Because the Bible is not going to put any demands on you. You see, you can interpret it to mean anything you like. But if there's a Jesus there, you see, those are demands. It's by no accident that only 12 or so people followed Jesus after all those people who heard gospel. Only just this handful could follow. And that's because there was demands to really practice this. There's no demands being made. The demand, if anything, is just believe, but no practice. And spirituality is about practice. You have to practice this thing, you see.
Well, you serve by being on the usher board. You serve by being in the choir.
Though you don't transcend ego like that. That's ego reinforcing.
Okay.
You follow me?
So those are the demands. The demands on you are you come to Wednesdays and you come to Sundays and you come to the pastor's wife's tea and you come to the pastor's birthday and you tithe. And once you have met those responsibilities, your morality is your own business unless it becomes public knowledge.
Right, right. And that is that's the whole problem, isn't it? Now, what has any of that to do with cultivating the ability to transcend the negative states of mind? What does any of that have to do with the elevation of consciousness? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And this is the kind of religion that has been made available in our community. I call it plantation Christianity. It's the same Christianity that was given to you by your slave masters. You see? The same Islam that was given to you by your slave master. That stuff do not transform anybody. I mean, it's self-evident. If everybody in our community was a Christian that claimed to be a Christian, if everybody in our community was a real Muslim who claims to be a Muslim, then where would there be a basis for all this violence? The black community should be like a paradise, wouldn't it? Based on all the claims. Well, clearly. You see, no transformation is happening. There's no guru. There's no sage. There's no mystic. And don't confuse a pastor with a mystic, with a guru. Pastor's not a guru. Pastor is a vehicle of dogma, doctrine. You follow me?
What does it take to become a guru?
Now, that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show, you see. But
could a pastor become a guru?
Certainly, everybody can become a guru. Everybody has the inherent capacity and ability to become guru. You see, but that's a process. There's a real ordeal that one has to go through. If you can't be a disciple, you can't be a guru. If you don't have the discipline, the word discipline and disciple come from the same root. You see, there's a real ordeal that one has to go through. Jesus says, why do you marvel at the things I do? Ye can do these same things and even greater. Everybody can become a Jesus. Everybody can become a Muhammad or a Mahavir or a Kajami and so forth. It's every man and woman birthright. But the question is, who's willing to do that work? You see? Now, singing in a choir, and I'm not against any of these things. I love that stuff, but I'm not confused. That's not sadhana. You see,
that's not work.
That's not work. Sadhana means
work.
That's right. Sadhana means putting in spiritual work. You got to really do something. As we can sit around and talk about how nice it would be to become doctors, but you will not become a doctor just by discussing how nice that will be, will it? You got to actually go to medical school and do the work. Well, the spirituality is like that. You see, But we've been given a bankrupt concept of what it means to be spiritual. We actually think going to church, paying tithes, singing in the choir, cooking chicken dinners and having French fries, fish fries and all
cakes.
that, baking cake, that's religion. Or memorizing some scriptures, quoting a few scriptures here and there. We think that's real, true religion. And that's not true religion. It doesn't transform anybody. You remain the same old rotten individual you was before you even joined. Are you with me? Doesn't transform. Now there's 2 billion Christians. Nearly a billion or so people calling themselves Muslim. How is this world so messed up? With billions of Christians and billions of Muslims, billions of Jews.
Because billions of Christians and billions of Muslims are at odds with each other.
Sure. And how could they be at odds with each other if they're really true Christians or true Muslims? You see. And that's the distinction. That's the distinction between spirituality and conventional religion.
And that's the distinction between the House of Rah and other spiritual centers, practices, religious otherwise.
Yes.
And it has been in existence now for, well, how long?
Wow, probably close to 16, 17 years.
16 or 17 years.
But you know, Gudamaji, my whole effort is not simply to offer people teachings. I offer relationship. Very different things. You see, it's a relationship. It comes full of all kinds of demands and obligations on both sides of that relationship. You see, it's a relationship. It's not just a place where dispensing some philosophy. I mean, you can go to a local university and get that.
We have 1 minute.
1 minute, huh?
You may say whatever you like.
Well, I think no matter what I'd say, the best thing is for people to have their own experience. They're most welcome. If they're ever free on any first Sunday of the month, they're most welcome to come by Cedar Park and then see with their own eyes, hear with their own ears, and let them make up their mind.
At 12 o'clock.
12:30. Yes.
12:30.
Yes, and they can make up their own thing. But that is the one thing that, what I think that I'm different, is that I offer relationship, spiritual relationship. And that's the heart of it all, isn't it? Okay.
Rashek Ahmad.
Rashek Ahmad.
Join us every Friday at 8:30 p.m. on Channel 19 for more of OmniU Presents the H3O